We're back. You are chatting with John P. Today, I'm going to be talking about some watches that are fashion watches yet deserve respect. I know, this is pretty crazy, right guys? Typically, us watch collectors and geeks and savants, we like to think that, when a watch somehow is tied to a brand that's not known for watches, not known for watchmaking, not known for being part of the world of horology, at least not for most, then maybe that's not a watch that we should consider. Maybe we should not add that watch to our collection. Maybe even sometimes, and I do read the comments below in the videos, maybe even sometimes the watches get talked negatively about, or they get kind of snubbed and pushed aside by at least those that consider themselves hardcore watch enthusiasts. But I'm here to share with you a handful of watches that actually I believe, and if you know watches and movements, then surely you will believe as well that these watches at least deserve respect in some regard. And there are some of the watches on this list that are pretty surprisingly housing movements of watches that are several times the retail price. So some of them are actually pretty great deals. On the wrist today, I have what some people are calling the latest entrant to the fashion watch segment. I know this is very polarizing. A Rolex Oyster Perpetual 39 red grape dial. And here's the thing, guys, don't mean to rile up too many Rolex fans out there, but there was a couple of comments saying that Rolex is considered a fashion watch now. I'm not going to talk about that, but I know that's going to kind of rustle somebody up in the comments below. So guys, the first watch, how could I possibly forget? At delraywatch.com, we just took in so many crazy and amazing new watches. I was actually traveling for a little bit, just came back into the office, and I saw how many cool watches that Fed and Jonathan here and Jacob brought in. I couldn't even believe the cool watches that we got in, so make sure to check those out, delraywatch.com. The first watch on the list is going to be really a brand that has a few watches that I believe are respectable, and this is Ralph Lauren. Ralph Lauren is known mainly for their menswear, for their polo shirts, for different things. They've had the Black Label and I think different partnerships over the years. Ralph Lauren, let's be serious, everybody knows Ralph Lauren, but a handful of years back, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, they started producing and at least selling watches, and the interesting thing is they were featuring movements by JLC. One of the watches actually, I believe, featured the same movement that Cartier was using for some of their pieces as well. This was the original sporting chronograph in the sporting lineup. I've held a bunch of these, and they really do feel much more like a JLC or a Cartier than something you would expect from a fashion brand of selling polo shirts and t-shirts and shoes and things like that. But they do feature the JLC movements, or at least they used to in the sporting collection. Now they've changed a little bit, and I believe they use Solitas or equivalents, which are still respectable for what they are in their own regard, considering current Ralph Lauren watches, I believe, retail $3,000 to $4,000, so in line with other watches that use those movements. But specifically, the World Time uses the same, and there'll be a picture here, it uses the same movement as the JLC World Time, and there is such a difference in terms of pricing. I see these Ralph Lauren, I'm almost, it's difficult, if you notice me thinking there, I'm almost confusing the two because it's so hard to believe that, it's almost like as watch collectors, it doesn't equate, right? Like horology and Ralph Lauren name, but it does, I promise you. It features the same JLC World Time movement that JLC was using in watches, especially in precious metal, for many, many, many times. And I see these sometimes go on eBay and Chrono24 and on the forums, Watch You Seek, Rolex forum, using Watch Recon. I see these things going for sometimes a couple $1,000s and under, and the JLC equivalent's much more. So I think good value, the case construction is there, the quality is there. I know there are some watch collectors out there that have added this because we've worked with them, and I think we had a few at Del Rey, so I know that there's a couple of you out there that have it. Please leave in the comments below and chime in how great of a value this collection is by Ralph Lauren, including and most predominantly the sporting collection. Next, we have two specific Zegna watches. Yes, Zegna, the menswear and also leather goods manufacturer, just the luxury products. Typically, they're making leather products or they're making clothes for men. Sometimes you see Zegna interiors in cars, and they have a sports line, and there's so many different versions of things that they've produced. But they've also produced watches, and who they chose to do this with is none other than Gerard Perego, one of my favorite brands. And if you've seen different videos that I've made in the past, I think that Gerard Perego does such a great job, even today with their Laureato lineup and some of the other pieces in the 1966 collection, and just such great quality in line with Patek Philippe in many cases, and Vacheron, though at a little bit better of a price point and more unique and exciting designs, and they're kind of willing to push the envelope a little bit more. And these two examples certainly do not break that mold. So what happened was Zegna had Gerard Perego make them a special version of the 1966 annual calendar equation of time, highly complicated watch in gold, a little bit rare, but I saw some of these on Chrono 24 I believe a month and a half ago. I think they may have sold, because we were talking about maybe $5,000 or $6,000 compared to what from Gerard Perego would have maybe cost in the several tens of thousands, maybe $20,000, $30,000, $35,000 retail or pre-owned, just kind of depending in that scale, but in that range price point. And you had the Zegna equivalent, and it said Zegna on the dial, so if you could live with it, or if maybe that was a plus for you because it's a little bit more rare, it might turn into something more collectible in the future. But it's a Gerard Perego watch, right? So even though technically fashion, see where we're going with this, guys, and that's kind of where the rest of the list is going as well, but even though it's a fashion watch, it's made by this high-end, very respectable luxury watch manufacturer that features their own movements. And guys, we know Gerard Perego, trust me, great watch. Also, they made a Zegna Sea Diver, and this watch looked a lot like the Gerard Perego Seahawk, though there wasn't as much information released when this watch came out. You know, there was a big buzz, I believe, on A Blog to Watch when they were popular, and Hodinkee obviously still popular. They made some press releases. This was probably going on 6 years ago now, I believe. And if you're familiar with the Gerard Perego Seahawk lineup, it was the lineup of the dive watches. They had the Oracle version, the BMW version, a bunch of versions of the Seahawk, even going back to their earliest days of the lineage of their modern production starting in the 1950s with the original Seahawk lineup, which may have been actually late 40s now that I think about it, though more of a dress watch. So it's, you know, essentially their dive watch, generally on a rubber strap, but they make it on a bracelet. And Zegna's looks a little bit different, and I think probably the case construction was worked on by Gerard Perego, if not made totally by them. The movements, I don't believe, were actually produced by Gerard Perego. There was a version that actually featured the Gerard Perego movements, but I believe they went into something like an ETA eventually. But not a lot of these things floating around. I think there's 2 out of Italy right now on eBay and none other out there. So these really dried up. I don't think many of them sold. I remember a couple years ago we saw a few floating in the dealer groups that were in here at Delray Watch, and they were trading pretty low and they disappeared. I didn't get the chance to pick one up, and I would have loved to, because I would have loved to just have it interesting, talk about it, show it with you, share it. But this, of course, does have very high standards, and those that I know that have added it to their collection, they put it right in line with the Gerard Perego equivalent, the Seahawk, though it looks a little bit different, but the same basic aesthetics. Next, we move on to the Hermès Arceau L'Or. Yes, I know I probably butchered that if you do speak French, but I'm not a French guy, so that's what you get. Now, Hermès is another one that always comes up in conversation with watch guys, talking about the movements and horology, and you get someone that might be a little bit newer to watches, or there might be a little bit of a purist, and they don't want to acknowledge the fact that Hermès has technically in-house, technically not in-house movements. So they have calibers. They have this one specifically that's in this watch, the H1837. It's a Vaucher movement, and Vaucher makes movements for many brands, and they've been in Parmigiani Fleurier watches. And the interesting thing to know about this is Hermès actually owns part of this watch, and specifically watch movement manufacturers. So they own part of this watch manufacturer. They can make the movements in the assembly line. I know it sounds a little bit distasteful to call it an assembly line, but in reality, the watches are made on a bit of an assembly line, a little bit more sophisticated of an assembly line. It's not a Ford plant, but they are producing watches based on assembly in a line. So Hermes makes these watches with Vaucher, very high quality. The movements are generally decorated with kind of the Hermes signature H pattern, which is cool. You know, you're not going to generally see brands put their logo in that kind of uniform pattern. You see it with Grand Seiko on sometimes their dials. You see it, even Rolex had, you know, like the Jubilee dial and some of the others over the years were a little bit of a pattern there, unique to the branding, or, you know, paying display to the branding. And so that's what's cool about the Hermes movements, but specifically this one watch example. They've got others in the lineup, past and present, that I think are very respectable, but this particular watch movement, what's cool is as the time goes and the moon rotation turns, the actual dials that tell the time will also move as well. And so there's videos where Hermes, the brand, will actually show you all of the gears and mechanics and the machining behind the particular movement, how they modified it and put the specific module on there. But when a brand does that, it's more than them just saying, hey, you know, we put decent parts into a watch. It actually shows that they want to be part of the conversation of horology, more so than them just dumping, you know, an Etta or a Solita movement in a watch that was made by one of the same case manufacturers that all the other brands use, and then saying, hey, we make Swiss luxury watches. They actually took it the extra mile, developed the components and the mechanisms and the module behind that particular complication, and that's something that I'm really looking forward to see Hermes as a brand kind of build out now that they own part of Vaucher, and really see where they go with watches. So Hermes, guys, do not write them off. There's others out there, and don't forget they had the co-branded or the partnered limited release with Hodinkee, so it shows that they want to be part of the watch community now and into the future. Let's keep them on our radar. Next, we have a Chanel Monsieur, and what other way to call a watch a luxury item than throw a French word on the end, right, guys? I mean, you can charge more if you put a French word on your watch, it seems, if you are a fashion watch. I don't know about that, actually, but I kind of get that feeling from some of these fashion watch brands. But nonetheless, this is actually a pretty cool watch, pretty high retail price, but it's because this particular jump hour watch is limited edition, all precious metal, and if you did not know, Chanel actually invested in Romain Gaultier, his production of high-end, independent, very high-quality watches that are made. I mean, if you're familiar with him and some of the others like Kari Voutilainen, and arguably getting into Journe today, but they're kind of getting into that mainstream arena, Gaultier is acknowledged and collected by some of the most discerning watch collectors. Very high price points. I mean, we're talking, get them maybe pre-owned 30 to 60K arena if it's some kind of bizarre color combination that's not really accepted by most people. But I mean, we're getting into hundreds of thousands of dollars of watches here. So when Chanel kind of takes piece and invests, it shows that they also are really looking forward and trying to capture the attention of watch collectors. And so when they come out with this jump hour watch, jump hours are just cool. It's a complication that others like Gerald Genta have used, and you see it from other brands as well. And it's something that kind of shows, hey, we're not just giving you, once again, this time only or time date watch and slapping our logo on it. No, they're kind of doing the opposite. They're giving you the complications. They're giving you that kind of social proof in the watch space by partnering up. We're investing in the Gaultier with the high-end independent watch manufacturers. It shows that they're here today at least, but they've actually put the money where their mouth is, and this watch is just cool. Yep, sure, high price point for a watch that does say Chanel on the dial, but if you're the guy that has a lot of watches or you've just had so many watches, and considering this is limited production, limited edition, numbered edition watches, that's kind of where they're targeting. You know, this might be something to add to your collection. Also, they kind of revamped the J12, kind of the women's sports watch category, and they've made a men's version with a moon phase. So they're trying things. They certainly are trying things, but at least they have something interesting and something special for those that are kind of looking to play in that arena, which aren't a lot of people, but once again, these are numbered limited editions, so at least they're kind of in the watch collectors arena. And honorable mentions, guys, I would throw Louis Vuitton in there. I know kind of the tambour case at this point is a little bit like beating a dead horse. I guess it left a bad taste in a lot of collectors' mouths. But recently we had one of the more contemporary Louis Vuitton tambours come in through the door here at Delray Watch, and I was actually a little bit impressed. At first I was ashamed to admit it, but now, you know, I'm a guy or a man of facts, right? So if we get in a watch and the quality is there, if it says Louis Vuitton, I can look past that and past kind of where their watches once were, because it's been so much time has passed, and the quality is there, so I can't deny it. So guys, what do you think about this list? Are there any of you out there that are just not willing to hop onto one of these watches because of their name in the fashion industry, even though they do have proven components that are respected in the watch community? I would love to hear it in the comments below. Is anybody signing up to buy a Ralph Lauren watch or a Zegna? I would love to hear it as well. Please do not forget to thumbs up, like, and subscribe. I really do appreciate it. And guys, make sure to please check out DelrayWatch.com, where we are working around the clock tirelessly to bring you the best deals in watches today. Thanks guys, you've been chatting with John P. Ciao.